Everyone remembers Concorde for its speed. The real story is how it bled money with every flight. It was an Anglo-French dream that cut the Atlantic crossing to 3 hours. Then it struggled to fill 100 premium seats. It faced ear-splitting noise, oil shocks, and bans that crushed its network. Before it became a museum icon, it broke the rules of aviation and the bank. Why did this bold leap vanish, and what is stopping it from coming back? On November 29, 1962, Britain and France signed a treaty that tied their fortunes together in aviation. The plan was ambitious: build a passenger jet that could fly twice the speed of sound, cross the Atlantic in just over 3 hours, and do it with comfort and style. Engineers from the British Aircraft Corporation and Sud Aviation worked side by side, trading blueprints and ideas across the channel. Their solution was unlike anything seen in commercial flight: a long, slender fuselage paired with a sweeping delta wing. This triangular wing, inspired by military jets, let Concorde slice through the air at Mach 2. Its shape was no accident. Only a delta could keep the plane stable and efficient at such speeds, even if it meant landing like a dart and requiring long, reinforced runways. The nose, sharp and drooping, became Concorde's signature. Hydraulic systems let pilots lower it for takeoff and landing, restoring visibility blocked by the pointed design needed for supersonic flight. It was a practical answer to a problem created by speed itself. Inside, the aircraft was narrow and compact. Space was sacrificed for performance. Every inch, every angle, was dictated by the need to outrun sound and heat. Power came from 4 Rolls-Royce and Snecma Olympus engines, pure turbojets with afterburners, built through a British-French partnership. These engines roared to life on takeoff and pushed Concorde past the sound barrier. Project leaders Sir Archibald Russell and Lucien Cervanti brought together decades of jet experience. Their teams solved problems as they went, inventing new materials, new controls, and new ways to move fuel for balance at high speeds. Concorde's shape and systems were a direct response to the laws of physics at Mach 2. But every breakthrough carried a cost, and that set the stage for the challenges that would follow. Test pilots took Concorde into the sky for the first time in early 1969. The French prototype 001 lifted off from Toulouse on March 2, 1969. The British 002 followed a month later from Filton. Each flight pushed the envelope higher, faster, farther. Over the Bay of Biscay, Jean Pinet guided the aircraft past the sound barrier. By October of 1969, Concorde reached Mach 2, proving that sustained supersonic flight was possible for a passenger jet. The Olympus engines, built by Rolls-Royce and Snecma, roared with afterburners as the pilots watched their instruments climb. Every system was tested: fuel transfer, fly-by-wire controls, hydraulics, and the droop nose, which lowered smoothly for landing after slicing through the air at twice the speed of sound. Certification flights spanned continents, from desert heat in Africa to winter cold in northern Europe, showing that Concorde could handle real-world conditions. After years of trials and technical hurdles, the aircraft received its airworthiness certificates. The first transatlantic crossing came in September 1973, a preview of what was to come. On January 21, 1976, Concorde entered commercial service. Air France flew from Paris to Rio de Janeiro, and British Airways launched from London to Bahrain. The most famous run quickly became London or Paris to New York, crossing the Atlantic in just 3.5 hours. Crews wore crisp uniforms, passengers sipped champagne, and the world watched as a new era of flight began. Concorde had moved from dream to daily reality, ready to prove itself in the marketplace. Concorde's business case rested on a narrow margin. The aircraft carried about 100 passengers, all in a single premium cabin. By comparison, A Boeing 747 of the same era could seat 350 to 400 travelers, spreading costs over 4 times as many tickets. For Concorde, every empty seat mattered. Airlines needed to fill at least 80% of seats just to break even. That left little room for error. Ticket prices reflected that pressure. A round trip between London and New York could run $12,000 in the 1980s. That was several times the cost of a first-class seat on a subsonic jet. Only the wealthiest travelers, celebrities, and executives could justify the fare. For British Airways and Air France, Concorde's profits depended on keeping this small group coming back, flight after flight. Operating costs were relentless. The Olympus engines, powerful but thirsty, burned about 21 tons of fuel every hour at cruise. That was nearly double the fuel burn per passenger of a Boeing 747. When oil prices spiked during the OPEC crises of 1973 and again in 1979, Concorde's economics became even more fragile. Each surge in jet fuel prices pushed the aircraft closer to unprofitability, with little cushion to absorb the shock. For the airlines, Concorde was a high-stakes gamble. It depended on stable oil markets, a steady stream of high-paying customers, and no surprises. Any disruption could tip the balance, and the dream of supersonic travel became a financial headache. A wall of regulations closed in around Concorde before it could expand. In 1973, the U.S. government banned commercial supersonic flights over land because of the disruptive shock of the sonic boom. That single rule erased nearly all domestic American routes from Concorde's map. The aircraft could only fly at full speed over the open ocean. Even then, options were limited. Most cities lay beyond Concorde's range or required long stretches of subsonic flight, and that erased the time advantage. Airports added their own limits. Heathrow and JFK, the 2 main hubs, imposed strict noise quotas and curfews. Daytime slots were precious. Night flights were off-limits. Concorde's Olympus engines were tuned for raw power, and they made more noise on takeoff than any other commercial jet. Local authorities measured every decibel. If the aircraft exceeded its noise allowance, it risked losing access altogether. Only a handful of airports worldwide could handle the long, reinforced runways and the specialized ground equipment Concorde required. With each new rule, the network shrank. At its peak, no more than 14 Concordes flew in commercial service. The tiny fleet meant spare parts were scarce and expensive. When a plane needed repairs, it could wait days for a component to arrive. The entire operation depended on a fragile chain of supply, scheduling, and regulatory permission. For British Airways and Air France, every flight was a balancing act between the promise of speed and the reality of isolation. On July 25, 2000, Air France Flight 4590 accelerated down the runway at Charles de Gaulle. A strip of metal, fallen from another plane, lay hidden on the tarmac. As Concorde's tires struck the debris at 175 knots, it burst, sending fragments into the left wing. Fuel tank number 5 ruptured. Flames trailed beneath the aircraft as it struggled to lift off. Within 2 minutes, the jet crashed into a hotel in Gonesse. All 109 people on board died, along with 4 people on the ground. It was Concorde's only fatal accident, but it changed everything. French investigators traced the disaster to a chain of small failures: runway debris, overloaded tanks, and a design vulnerable to puncture all played a role. Regulators grounded the fleet immediately. Engineers raced to add Kevlar linings to the fuel tanks and to fit stronger Michelin tires. Each aircraft needed weeks in the hangar and millions of dollars in upgrades. For a fleet of just a handful, the cost per plane was staggering. The safety fixes were essential, but the economics grew even more fragile. Passenger numbers never recovered after Concorde returned to service. The months following September 11th 2001, saw transatlantic premium traffic fall to levels not seen in decades. Corporate travel budgets shrank overnight. Even the most loyal customers hesitated to book. Load factor charts from 2001 and 2002 show a steep drop. Many flights left half their seats empty, far below the break-even point. Ticket prices were cut, but the revenue gap only widened. Meanwhile, the cost of keeping each aircraft airworthy continued to rise. Every flight required more maintenance hours, and the new safety retrofits weighed on the bottom line. In boardrooms at British Airways and Air France, executives studied the numbers. The business case was gone. There were no new markets to chase, no relief from fixed costs, and no sign that demand would return. The decision became clear. Concorde could no longer pay its way. Its era was ending, not with a crash, but with a quiet exit from the stage. Today, every supersonic proposal still runs into Concorde's old limits, noise, cost, and the hard math of who can really pay for speed. The dream flies on in museum halls, but the rules it rewrote still shape every airport and every ticket. Supersonic ambition never left. Its lessons have not either.